Hey, what up? I'm just back from the gym. I realize 80% of my videos these days start with me saying I'm just back from the gym, but that's because I don't have a lot of other things going on in my life. Aside from going to the gym and spending long hours studying Chinese. I remember not too long ago, one of my detractors, one of my haters here on the internet, complained that he didn't think I was really going to university because I was uploading so many videos. And he was probably saying, like, if you see a 15-minute video on my channel, you realize it took me 15 minutes and 1 second to record, right? Like, there's no real preparation. There's no scripting process. My publicist Morty, my agent, the executives at à-bas-le-ciel Broadcasting Corporation, they don't get too involved with the creative process. I have a lot of independent agency here to just come on camera and start talking. So no, it doesn't distract too much from my studies. The problem, if anything, what does take time is if you make a video and you're not certain you want to upload it, and then you watch it 3 or 4 times to make sure you're 100% sure, that cuts into your schedule. But if you're comfortable with what you're saying, if you're not pushing your limits, 15 minutes, make a 15-minute video and upload. I'm making this video right now in response to 2 new subscribers on Patreon. It's always nice when I can take the time to say hi to people who've paid the $1 to sign up. So one of them is named Cam, and one is named Stan. So by default, I just use people's first names, so they're a little bit anonymous. If they've signed up to support me, thank you very much for your $1 a month. Currently, Patreon is the only income I have on planet Earth. We'll see how that works out. I don't even mean long term. So Cam sent me a message saying, I've been listening to your content over the last few weeks. I definitely don't agree with everything you say, but that is the damn point. Thank you, Cam. Not only do you disagree with me and you appreciate the disagreement, you're willing to pay $1 to go on disagreeing with me. So thank you. It shows some depth, shows some character on your part. So he says further, I appreciate an intellectual challenge to my beliefs and opinions on a regular basis. Great, me too. I make these kind of videos because they're the kind of videos I'd want to watch myself if I was one of you, if I was just a viewer and not a YouTuber. And of course I had a period in my life, really right after my daughter was born, during that period where I was taking care of the newborn baby, where I would try to listen to podcasts about veganism while I was washing the dishes, things like that, or intelligent YouTube videos, really while I was cooking and washing the dishes. And man, there just wasn't enough out there. But that was before I started recording and uploading my own videos. So I know what it's like. And hey, what I do is not for everybody, but I know I myself, if I were in the audience, I'd appreciate it. And there was a time when I was just in the audience, not making my own videos. So Cam goes on to ask, do you think that Hollywood can play an important role in spreading veganism throughout Western culture? And he then talks about some of the things. He mentioned some of my own past videos that have comments salient to this question, and he says that a certain Hollywood personality reflected that movies were part of the process of homosexuality being more and more accepted in the Western world, the representation of gay characters in cinema, etc. Well, Cam, that is an interesting example, but it may be a holotype. Hollywood movies, have they led to the greater acceptance of African Americans or the greater demonization of African Americans? And, although it's problematic within the United States, how black people are portrayed in cinema and how that shapes people's expectations of them, it's even more problematic if you think about how black people are perceived in Japan or in China, where their only impression of African Americans is via American movies, American cinema, and normally only the most successful, only the blockbuster movies. They're not going to see a small art house film about the black experience in America. A few years back, more than 10 years ago, I remember in Canada we had a lot of soul searching about the representation of Italians in cinema and in television. Because the Italian-Canadian community, who are politically organized, they were actually complaining to the press, to the government, and to newspapers and so on, that they were really encountering different kinds of hostility and misconceptions about who they are because of the way Italians, as an ethnic minority at that time, this is probably around the year 2000, I forget, how Italians were being represented, saying, look, this is not who we are. And now you can imagine part of the problem there, even though Italians are not a visible minority in the same way as African Americans, Italians sometimes, or it's not even mentioned that a character is Italian, but if it is mentioned that they're Italian, then they will very often be a bad stereotype. So this is a shallow response to part of your question, but I'm pointing out that although you can, I think, find positive examples of how movies have helped to advance just the sympathetic attitude toward homosexual people in not just Western culture, but the whole world's culture, there are counterexamples that are troubling. And now if we want to ask about something a little bit deeper, a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more politically demanding, do you think that Hollywood movies have advanced democracy? It's actually a very difficult question to answer. How is democracy perceived because of its representation, as a consequence of its representation in movies, in China, in Japan, in India, in Indonesia? I think, sadly, if you look at a more complex, loaded, demanding concept, not just something like acceptance of homosexuals, you're going to come to a much more troubling set of conclusions. So can Hollywood play a role in spreading veganism through Western culture? Sadly, my two-part answer to this is, one, I think the first part, it's going to be like the representation of African Americans or Italian Americans as bad stereotypes in Hollywood movies. I think you're going to have the crazy vegan as a comedic character in the background. We've already seen that. So you're going to have a vegan hipster or vegan, maybe a vegan yoga instructor, as something in comedies or what have you. Character falls in love with a woman who's a yoga instructor, but she's vegan and he can't put up with her. This kind of thing, I think, is going to be the main representation of vegans for many, many years to come. Could be worse, but I think actually it's going to reinforce negative expectations, negative stereotypes, in the same way that Italians got fed up with people thinking that they're gangsters or thinking that they're a certain kind of comedic character, certain kinds of over-the-top behaviors. I think actually that is what we're in for in the next 10, 15 years. But you asked in the hypothetical, can cinema, can the mainstream media be a positive? They can. Will it? It's another question. It can, though. Sure, it can be tremendously positive. So Stan, both of these guys, I think within 24 hours, signed up, paid the $1, sent me a question, and I don't know, within 48 hours or something, I'm here recording a response. So Stan says, "Hi Eisel, I've been following your content for a while. I appreciate your critical take on veganism. I also admire your autodidact approach, and I find many of your critiques of academia intriguing. This is twice interesting, or twice as interesting, perhaps he means. This is twice as interesting since you have an academic background, have done original research, and interact with academic cultures." Thank you, Stan. I just point out, though, that technically I have never been an academic in the sense that I have never been paid to be a university professor or an equivalent role. So I know there's a different sense in which you're using academic here, and it's true. I've been an observer of academic culture, and I've interacted with it and everything else. But I am not now, and never will be, a university professor, which is a kind of strict definition of what it means to be an academic, I think. That being said, Stan continues, I'm thinking about how I can be effective in ecological and vegan activism. Your videos on different political issues and also on seemingly simple yet practical actions, such as writing a children's book or opening a vegan restaurant, resonate with me. Pause. I'll just say there, I still talk about that stuff face-to-face with other vegans and via Skype and through other methods. Just the other day I was talking to a guy, I won't say who's really seriously interested in opening a vegan gym. And that gym would have a juice bar. And, the great thing about a gym as opposed to a restaurant is, of course, you'd have non-vegans coming in and using the gym and learning about veganism when they're there. Whereas I think many vegan restaurants, 100% of your clientele is already vegan, or almost 100% of your clientele. So, Stan continues, I am, however, more academically inclined, i.e. I don't see myself becoming a business person. So he mentions his bachelor's degree was in sociology and anthropology, and he's now considering getting a master's and a PhD. He asks a very broad question. He asks, what do you need to know to be a good learner? Boy, not the question I thought was coming. I thought he was going to ask me something about the institutional reality of learning. What tools and methods do you see as useful? Oh man, you're asking me to give a 2-hour monologue here. I could talk about this for ages. More specifically then, how does this relate to academia? Well, look, Stan, last things first. If you are going to get a master's degree and a PhD in anthropology or anything like anthropology, you are putting yourself into a situation where, on the one hand, you may be expected to be a complete autodidact because nobody teaches you anything, nobody helps you with anything. Or on the other hand, you may be put in a situation where you're really treated like the servant of a professor, where you're really in a servile capacity. And in either case, making a wise choice has everything to do with just one or two career academics you're going to rely on. You're really putting your trust in not an academic system in general, not even one university in general. You're putting your trust in one person who's going to be your supervisor, or possibly two people if the two professors really cooperate as your supervisors. And that will make or break your entire experience. So it's a fateful, terrible decision to make. I went and spoke to one professor who said he'd have me as a student, as a graduate student. And when I spoke to him, I forget the exact number. He said something like he had 26 or 28 graduate students simultaneously. He was supervising like 26 to 28 graduate students at the same time. And I pointed out to him, so it's not possible that you even see each of your graduate students for 1 hour a month, in terms of your supervision, in terms of the education you're supposedly receiving. And he said, no, he talks to less often than 1 hour every 3 months or something. You get absolutely no education whatsoever. But his university, what they did was they compensated for this by putting the graduate students into little groups, into a discussion circle, and forcing them to meet a couple times a week and discuss their work in a circle of equally ignorant students. This was in a department of religion, so I would have been there as a scholar of Buddhism, and I would have been sitting down and presenting my views, my sophisticated views on Buddhist philosophy to a circle of people where the other people, one would be a scholar of Islam, one would be a scholar of medieval Catholicism, one might be a scholar of modern Protestantism. The idea that this is a jury of my peers, especially in a department of religion, of world religion, just ridiculous. Even if there's a Hindu at the table, a Hindu specialist would never be able to even, what the worst thing is about Buddhism, even if there was a specialist in Mahayana Buddhism or, Japanese Buddhism, they wouldn't have any clue what I was presenting. If you're doing advanced Theravada Buddhist studies, this is really specialized, and you really need to be working with people who appreciate exactly that field. And it's not a small field, I'm sorry, but the space in between India and China is enormous. It includes Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, etc., etc., etc. So we shouldn't regard it as something small or marginalized, but that was a terrible program. So now look, it's just one example. I guess I can talk for hours about this, sadly. After that conversation with that professor, there were many other reasons why I was not interested in that program, but that fact alone, I'm not interested. If I would have been stupid enough to get that degree, I would be unemployed and unemployable. PhD in religion? You want to perform funeral services? I'd love to. I'd love to have a vegan funeral parlor, man. That's a great business, but it ain't academia. So looking at the actual education that's being offered to you is tremendously important. Hilariously here, actually, in my school in China, there's one woman who's a professor at a university where I'd spoken to another professor. She's in the same department, too. An Asian Studies department, basically. It doesn't have that name. And I commented to her, "Oh, it's interesting. You're from that university department." I spoke to one of the profs there about, getting an MA and PhD with you guys. But, he actually got nervous and couldn't answer some of my really simple questions. So I wasn't interested when that became clear to me that he couldn't answer some very simple questions. And I remember she said, so like what kind of questions couldn't he answer about the program? I said, well, for example, his program is supposed to be in the Thai language. So Thai, not Pali, not Chinese, I've studied so many languages. It's supposed to be Thai as the primary language I'd be learning. And he couldn't answer the question of what was the name of the instructor who actually taught the Thai language at that university, because it wasn't listed on the website. There was nobody listed in the faculty. There was nobody officially with a PhD who was teaching the language. And this woman said to me, "Oh, well, that's funny, because his wife teaches those classes." And I said to her, "That must be. That's probably why he didn't want to answer the question." These setups in so many of these universities. Well, the person who actually teaches the language, who actually teaches that course, doesn't have a PhD, so they're not listed on the website. So there's something going on under the table. They only got that job because of who they're married to or who they're sleeping with, or because there's a favor owed to them. I know some people, within Buddhist studies, there's some people who just never got their PhD, and they kind of sort of became professors anyway, and, sort of code of silence around it. Nobody asks, nobody tells. Ugh. I'm glad that only took 5 minutes, huh? It felt like the longest 5 minutes of my life. The point is, sadly, you have got to dig. Before you commit to any program, read the person's book, read their thesis, get their PhD thesis out of the library on interlibrary loan, get the thesis that earned them their PhD, get out every significant book they've published, look at it, decide for yourself if it's nonsense or not. Really try to figure out how legit the program is in terms of the education you're receiving, in terms of the whole process, and in terms of who that person is and what kind of personal integrity they have if they're going to be your supervisor. And in anthropology, it's a dangerous game. And in terms of employment, if you get your PhD in anthropology, I don't have to tell you. You've got a bright future. Bright future as a security guard at the mall. And after you get that PhD in anthropology, and all over Asia, I've known people with PhDs in anthropologies who are coping with that bleak future. But okay, that was the last part of your question. What do you need to know to be a good learner? Here's my snappy but honest answer. I could talk about this for an hour. Okay, you have to love being wrong. We don't learn from being wrong. We learn from noticing that we're wrong and then pressing in deeper. You have to develop the habit of mind. For some people, it comes naturally. For some people, it's second nature. For some people, it's really hard to get down. Of when you go through whether it's you're rereading your own work, you're reading someone else's work, noticing, oh, this proves me wrong. Oh, this contradicts some attitude, some assumption I had. And not feeling sad, not feeling dejected, feeling delighted. Because when you notice that you're wrong, that's when you know for a fact that you're learning something. And that's when you have the opportunity to really learn something. So I did a ton of research within the last year. I think less than 12 months. 8 months. I did a ton of research on Sakhalin Island. So that's an island straight north of Japan, straight east of Russia, straight northeast of Beijing, really. And all three of those countries tried to control it historically: China, Russia, Japan. And I basically discovered very simple facts, the type of facts that interest me about that place, that contradicted my expectations, contradicted my whole understanding of the history of Asia, ancient and modern. Now, is Sakhalin Island the most important place in the history of the world? No. But I realized, I'm wrong about something here. There's something for me to learn from the history of this place. And I did a ton of research on Sakhalin Island. Now, I put it this way. I think that made a much greater educational opportunity out of the courses I took in the last year than otherwise would have been the case. I created an opportunity out of some pretty boring courses that could have just written another essay about, a particular king in the history of Japan or something. And instead, I dealt with a set of dynamic questions where the borders of those three empires met and moved back and forth. And above all else, this reflects my own emphasis. Of course, my research also concerned the indigenous people and what the geography of Asia meant to them, independent of prior to those empires coming together. But that whole learning process, it's quite false to say that began with a desire for knowledge, with a hunger for learning. You can't desire to know something you're not even aware of yet. When I first enrolled in university, I'd never heard of Pali. I'd probably never heard of Myanmar. I probably couldn't find Burma on the map or something. When I first enrolled in university in, 1996, you know what I mean? Most of my research interests as they would develop as an adult man, I had no awareness of. So there's no way you can start off wanting to learn what you're going to learn. I realize you're based on the description, you're already an adult. I know I'm not talking to a teenager, but still, at my age now, this is still true. So desire to learn, the hunger is, it's almost irrelevant. What you need instead is that, to practice. It's not like falling, scraping your knee, and getting up again. Noticing you made a mistake, noticing you're wrong about something, noticing your own ignorance, being really aware of the limits of your own knowledge, and then feeling energized and motivated, and I guess activating that hunger coming to the fore when you realize you've been wrong. That I'd say is the most important thing. And man, like I say, I could talk for an hour. The lessons you learn as an autodidact, and I think sadly in a field like anthropology, you have to be an autodidact because you'll get very little help from unless you. I hope. If you're in a wonderful program, that's great. I'm happy for you, but you're going to have to teach yourself languages. You're going to have to teach yourself history and politics because none of that's in the anthropology program, and most of what they do teach you is going to be irrelevant to your field work. You're just going to learn, Melinovsky, etc. You're just going to learn canonical anthropology, and you gotta, beyond that, you've got to reinvent the wheel. You got to reinvent the meaning of life, break it into pieces, interrogate it, and put it back together again. That's the best part of anthropology. So there is a lot more I can say about that. But if there's one habit of mind that I think everyone can learn, it's what I've just mentioned. Because we don't learn from making mistakes, we learn from noticing that we make mistakes. And just as with the growth of a tree, it's not the density of the wood, it's not the size of the tree, it's not the thickness of the tree. All the life is out there at the limits of the tree. It's at the bark. It's it's just beneath the skin of the bark that the tree is carrying out its whole struggle to survive and thrive and expand. In the same way, it's having an acute awareness of the limits of your knowledge. So you notice when you run into something you don't understand, you can't quite handle. That, I guess, is my short answer. That's the crucial habit of mind you need to work on. Thanks for the $1. Hit me up.